Let me start. I'm Michal Simon, and let's talk about technical debt a little bit. Before that, let me tell you something about me and what I'm doing. Let me start with a story. After I finished university, I just bought a plane ticket and flew to San Francisco and started searching for a job in some cool startup, all the buzzwords just put on that. In a week, I did 25 interviews. Over the weekend, I did a hackathon, and it worked well. And I ended up in a dating startup, which was a pretty cool ride. Not much sleep, but a lot of coding, a lot of hacking together and stuff like that. It was a perfect journey. After a year, I returned back and thought, what will be the next thing for me? And I realized that writing good quality code is super important. And I helped companies, I had helped individuals to improve their code quality, and I realized there is a huge opportunity to do way better job. That's why George and me, we started a company called Kodiak, and we basically help developers fight technical debt. And this is what we will be talking about today. This is the agenda. We will talk a little bit what technical debt means. We will see some issues, and I would like to do it a little bit more interactive, so I would need your help to make it more fun. So if you are down to that, that will be great. We will talk about polymorphism as well as testing, and we will mention a little bit about automation at the end. I would like to say that there is nothing revolutionary over here. You know all that stuff probably, or at least 80%. It's just the way how you should use it. It's maybe a little bit different, so we will go through particular examples. Why we should care, right? Let's hack together a few scripts and it works, right? Why we should care about code quality. And this is the answer. Like, most of the time, we are reading the code, not writing. And we are usually reading code that somebody else wrote. So if it's terrible, we will have terrible time. And if we wrote something terrible, other people will have terrible time as well. And this is something we are trying to prevent. So, what is technical debt? This is really broad topic, so let's have a look on that from a few perspectives. You can think about that like this, right? Everybody tells you, hey, we don't have time. Like, we know there is technical debt, but we don't have time to fix it. And that's fine, it works, just don't touch it anymore, and it will maybe work for a little bit more. Who is in that situation, or who thinks that it applies to your project or something? Perfect. Thank you for the hands. I would like to put it like this. Imagine you are cooking a dinner for friends, and after the evening, you have a lot of dishes to clean. If you don't clean those dishes right away, you will have way more work to do in the morning, right? And this is software development, and in particular, problem called technical debt. Every time you release a feature, you have some dishes to clean. And we can do something about that. It's just cleaning the stuff after you finish the job, not leaving it for later. So what code quality actually means? I put two little groups here, because you can have different points of view, and that's totally fine. It depends on the project, it depends on the team, and a lot of other criteria. But I would say extensibility and maintainability are usually the most important for the business, right? If you don't agree with me, just feel free to raise your hand. It's totally fine.
How do you measure that?
All right, that's a great question. It's tricky, but we are trying to do that, and let's jump to that right after a few slides, okay? So readability is definitely a thing when your team grows, because when you have 2 people, you can just grab a beer, talk about your code, and be fine. But if your team is bigger, that's a way bigger issue as well. And testing, we will definitely touch that a little bit later. Performance is not always the case, because buying a little bit more servers is not expensive. The developer's time is way more expensive than the hardware we use. So, of course, there are some apps that really need to be performant. But, for a lot of cases, this is not so big issue. And scalability, that depends as well. If you are running a little WordPress site for jobs, that's fine. But, or not. But if you are running a global startup, that can be a big issue. So it depends. But I would say the first four things definitely matters when you are working on some successful project and it's not only your pet. So yeah, one more joke. This is very similar situation. So let's dive into those issues. I have a lot of code in the next few slides, so just stay with me. I hope you will not bored. And I will start not with PHP. I have a little bit of JavaScript, but we will transition to PHP very quickly. This is a very common issue, and just naming is a huge problem, which can cause you a lot of problems in your app. So using one thing for all the places where you are using it is definitely important. And yeah, I don't think we should spend more time on that, but this is very obvious. Searchable names are as well very important. So having a random number somewhere is sometimes super hard to track when it lives there a few years already and nobody knows what will happen if you change the number. But this example is way easier to understand, right? I can very easily just pass that code to somebody else and don't say anything else. Mental mapping, it's another problem that appears a lot. So you name some variable very shortly, like L, right? But when you keep adding stuff, it gets trickier and trickier because you are trying to understand all those little things in between, and at the end, you have no idea what that meant. When you have one variable, that's totally fine, but when you have 6, that's a totally different story, right? So keep it simple, keep it explicit, not implicit. I don't have to search what does it mean. Side effects, this is really JavaScript specific, but some kind of that behavior you can find in PHP as well. You should always produce a new value, not change the value you put in your function, right? Because this is some side effect, and nobody expects that function behaves like that. It's tricky to just realize when you don't read the inside, the body of the function, and you just call it. Global state, right? Global functions, just global state in general. This is a very tricky thing. And PHP, you can override stuff that is already in the language. And I saw that so many times, actually. If you do it properly, you will save yourself a lot of time of headache and other refactoring problems. Yeah, we are getting close to PHP, so thank you for staying with me.
Is it React code?
Pardon?
Is it React code?
React code?
Yeah.
No. Good one. So yeah, if you are writing like complex conditionals, it's way easier to just wrap them in a function or save them in a Boolean property and then use it in some if. Because it will be very clear what the if is actually doing. Just naming that Boolean. Pardon? Okay. Just naming that a Boolean will help you have a way better understanding of that. And what I really like to do is when I need to put, let's say, 3 or 4 things in an if, I like to break even that down and have like 2 variables and then compare those 2 variables maybe in a third one and even this one put in an if, because it's very clear what is happening by the name. Sometimes it sounds like, yeah, this is a lot of extra work, right? But it's valuable if you want to keep it maintainable. Yeah, this is a very common issue, right? A lot of business logic in templates. Luckily, or maybe not luckily, we have React these days, which is doing exactly this. But yeah, just don't do it. Just keep rendering and your business logic separate. It will be way easier to do any changes to it, and yeah, don't get lost. But now we have the fun part. I would need your help to figure out what is wrong on the slides. All right? I have only three things, so you don't have to worry. But please tell me what is wrong with this piece of code. And yeah, there are many things wrong, so yeah, there are multiple correct answers. Come on.
Mutates the array, like so it has side effects, like doesn't return the new array like after it deleted the image.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those issues. I would maybe say try to keep it simple. The issue I would like to show you is super simple. You don't have to even like read a lot of the code. So yeah, go ahead.
What is $ID?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Like $ID can be user ID, it can be product ID, it can be category ID. Yeah, if you see anything called ID, just start worrying. That's a problem, because anybody can pass anything there.
If there is no image with the specified ID, the case is not handled, I guess.
Sure, but it can be like users' images, right, or product images, or
No, I mean if you try to remove image with ID1, but there is no image with ID1.
Oh, okay. The error case, right? Handling of the error case. Yeah, definitely.
So in the dot block, can that be in the function declaration line instead of the dot block?
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Anything else? We have more slides, so.
The
Cool.
type of ID is not specified even in document.
Perfect. Yeah, type ID type is definitely not there. All right, let's move on. Okay. Or more stuff here? No. All right. I'm not sure if that's readable, but that's fine. That's
Problem.
perfect. Perfect.
Commented out code.
Yes, that's exactly it. You have Git. If you need to save some code, just use it and then remove it. You have the Git history. You can always come back to it if you need it. But this is not, this is wrong.
Commented out code specifically with nothing to say why it's interesting at the top.
Yes.
Sometimes commented out code may be okay if you have a comment say, this is interesting here.
Yeah, just some explanation will be at least helpful. But yeah, I mean, commit it explain it and then remove it because you can always come back to it. That's why we have Git, right? I don't think we should spend more time over here. I have another one for you.
Tabs.
Pardon?
Tabs.
Okay, tabs. Yeah, why not?
Line 2367.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's it. Yeah, if you see anything like that, just don't read the code at all. Like, that's the problem, the line number. Yeah. So, yeah, we don't have to spend more time over here. There are many other issues, but that's it. Thank you. That was a good one. So, yeah, let's move to a more serious topic than hating somebody's code. Conditionals, right? That's a very common thing what to use. And I will have a little demo on that. Just bear with me, it will not go wrong. But do you like using conditionals? Like who likes conditionals? All right, there's nothing wrong with them, right? What was that?
They are a necessary evil.
Yeah, that's kind of true. So let's dive a little bit into it. So I am saying avoid them, as was mentioned over here. And this will make your code way better. So if you get rid of ifs and replace them by polymorphism, it will be more readable, more testable, and more maintainable. This is a bold promise, right? Just prove it, right? All right, let me do that. The thing is that you are using ifs on a lot of places where you don't have to, and you have better constructs in the language. And this is definitely connected to PHP, but you can apply that in many languages. And for example, there are languages which don't support ifs at all, which is called functional programming, right? So for example, Haskell, right? No ifs. You are not able to do if. I mean, you can hack it around, but the point is don't use ifs. And the thing is, there are two problems. One is that imagine you are doing some flagging, right? Feature flagging. So you have some, let's say, controller, and you have the do method and the render method, right? And you need to do some decision in the do method. But then you realize, all right, I need the same thing to do in the render method because I need to show a different thing. And then you realize, all right, in my model somewhere, I need to use the same decision. And yeah, you just keep copying the if with the feature flag, which if you decide to change later, you will need to go like 20 places, on 20 places and just, yeah, change it. And I'm sure you will forget about one. And this will cause maybe a bad crash. Or you have ifs for debugging, right? Again, very, very common thing. And with the same scenario, actually. We will come to a real example, actually, later. But there are places where you just need ifs. It's very tricky to avoid them in those situations. And those are actually like just comparing two numbers, figuring out if these numbers are the same or one is bigger than the other. Yeah, it's just, yeah. The other thing is when you return nulls. That's another problem because when you return null somewhere, when you are processing that result, you need to use if to check if that's null or it's the real result. And this is problematic. You are just forcing yourself into using more ifs when it's not necessary. You should, other than null, you should always return some null object. So for example, logging, right? You can have a file logger for your production environment. But for debugging, you can have a null logger, which will just eat the input and throw it on dev null or whatever. You can keep it empty. That's totally fine, but it's way better to have this behavior in your app and keep it if-free. So let's try a little demo, all right? And let's model this little simple example. Imagine we need to build a structure of code that will solve that mathematical thing. And we would like to have a result, but we would like to have as well a function toString, which will just print it, or maybe figure out the parentheses, right? And not put them where it's not necessary. So let me actually switch to my demo. All right, this looks good. So let's do a little exercise before. So what we actually need, if we need to solve that particular thing, it's this. I'm sorry about my writing. I'm usually using keyboard. So imagine that like this. So we have the plus over here. This is the 1. This is times 2 and 3. Right? So we will need to solve it from the tree perspective. And this is giving us a way which needs to be figured out earlier than the other part. So let's go through what we actually need for figuring out those nodes. Sorry about that. Go away. So the thing is, when we have the value node, right, and we have the plus and times node, we need different things. In the value node, we just need a value, which is this, right? And when we have the operation node, the plus and times node, we will need the function, the actual operation, what we will do, right? And we will need a left and right sibling, which will have the other part, the rest of the equation. Does it make sense so far? Yeah. Cool. So let's do some coding, okay? I hope this is visible. Can everybody read it? Cool. So when you decide to implement that, you end up with something like that. As we mentioned, we have the operator, right? This is the function what we will actually need to execute. Then we have the value. And then we have the left and right. And then we have a method called execute, which will just deal with the whole equation. And with this class, we are able to just simply build the whole tree, even if it's super complex, and solve it. And imagine we have another function over here, which is the toString, right? And this is doing some other stuff which we don't need to implement here. But it will be very similar to the execution one, right?
You said that toString returns int?
Oh, sorry. That's definitely right. So I was going to say that we will not implement that function right now, so I will delete it. But focus on that part, okay? Because just keep in mind, we are planning to have the toString method as well. And imagine the amount of work we will need to replicate to that function as well. So, speaking about polymorphism, how can we improve this part, or this little code, this little class? Any ideas? How about polymorphism? So, let's actually look on the last line, okay, on the default. When we have a value, we don't need left and right and the operation. So let's separate it into a different class, okay? So let's say we will have value node, extends node, and what we will need to do is just have this little function over here and return this value, right? And I will need this part as well. Do you think it's better? I know I have some issues there, but does it make sense so far? So what we can do over here is just remove the thing what is not necessary over here, and just keep it like this. So what else can we do to improve it?
Make a plus node.
Perfect. So I would say let's do an operation node, okay? And what we will need to have is these two things. I will make them protected. And we would need to have an execute function as well, right? And yeah, I will keep it like this for now. We can make it abstract, stuff like that. And this is actually a good idea. And I think we should be able to do this. No, sorry. So, operation node, right? And now we can implement those two operations. So we have times and we have plus. We can also have a minus if you want. So let me use this part. Just rewrite it. Plus node extends operation node. And we don't need the value over here. But the part what we will need is this little thing. Right? And of course, we can have the times node. Like this. And the thing is that I can delete everything here and just make it abstract. And now we don't need actually any if or any switch. And the thing is that I don't want to write the whole thing, but if I do this, this is how I call it, right? So I can just create instances of those nodes and just put it together and form the whole equation without any if, which at the beginning can seem impossible, but right now it's super obvious, right? It's simple. And all the operations are in the class that it's small, it's maintainable, it's even testable. So,
So do you think it's
Yeah.
much easier to maintain this list of classes than the one expression we had before?
this is a good question. Is it easier to maintain so many classes than the one expression? And that's why I said we will have two string methods. And maybe we will have a print method. And maybe we will have, let's say, debug method. And in all of those methods, you will probably have the switch. And if you need to add one more operation, you will need to change all of them, which will be way harder and way easier to forget about one than just maintaining a few classes, right? And the interfaces will just force you to implement all of those things. All of those things. Because if you have an abstract class and there is a missing method, the child will not work. You will not be able to run it, which is way easier than forget about one state if in your switch. But feel free to don't agree with me. That's really okay. Anybody else don't agree?
One more question then. So what would be the difference between these and having them as methods in the main class? Do you think that would be better or different?
It's just how much you would like to. Sorry, the question was if we can just not use methods in the class, which is totally fine. It's just about the thing how much you would like to leverage the polymorphism aspect of your programming language. And there are languages where in JavaScript that will be actually a good approach. In PHP, just leverage as much of the object-oriented programming paradigm that you have. So I would say this is maybe better, easier. But yeah, totally agree. We can do functions. But it's always better than ifs.
And why you declare node type in property declaration and in the comment?
Because maybe I would like to require on inputs. So the thing what I haven't done is...
Yeah, I mean there is node on the property level and also in the comment. Can you just remove the comment from there?
Oh, yeah, sorry. This is some PHP of 7.4 and stuff like that, because this is not working on all versions. So the comment was just for back support. But what was your question? One more time?
Yeah, I was just asking to remove that.
Yeah. All right. One more question down there.
What would be the advantage to replace that abstract class with an interface? Advantage and disadvantage?
So when I have it really empty, interface makes total sense. But yeah, I'm expecting that maybe I will have some shared logic in that. This is super easy example, right? So just...
Okay, but for example, in the future, if you need to test this piece of code, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be better to test it using an interface? Will it be harder to test it as an abstract class, or it's going to be easier to test it as an interface?
So I would say that really depends on your use case, because maybe you have some siblings, you have some hierarchy which you need to follow. If you are solving these types of issues, yeah, there are some downsides of polymorphism with complexity and stuff like that. And you are definitely mentioning that, I feel. But I'm trying to show you the difference between ifs and the polymorphism. So yeah, but it's not perfect, but it's better.
And the constructor is missing.
Yeah, a constructor is definitely missing. I'm trying to keep it simple. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't disagree with you about wanting to get rid of conditionals, because that's one of the things you can do with refactoring.
Uh-huh.
They do say there's tons of conditionals in my code, but it's one thing you can do. That said, if you have some behavioral tests at maybe your service layer, we obviously think as humans in terms of conditionals. So I would maybe add that maybe start with conditionals first to get your logic down, and then if you do red-green refactor, maybe refactor is the time that you go, right, how do I refactor this? Bunch of conditionals, let's and do the natural evolution of start with conditionals and then maybe get rid of them.
I am totally down with that, because yeah, just if you are in the phase of prototyping, conditionals are totally fine. The problem is when you leave it like that, right? And just, yeah, everybody else will just hate you because they're all over your code base. But yeah, you are definitely right. It's just, you can start with it, but don't end with it. All right, let's move on, okay? Or anything else?
And what's the reason to have interface or base class not here?
So I'm not sure if I understand your question right.
Can we just remove interface node and remove all the extents or implement?
We can, but the reason usually why you would like to start with this is that in all the constructors over here, you want to make sure that you are passing the right value. And you know that everything in your node, for example, have the toString method or the execute method. Because you don't want to call it on something that doesn't have it. Does it make sense? Let me actually show you my full-fledged example because that will be easier to. So this is something what you would like to have.
Shouldn't be interface but not abstract class?
Yeah, you can do interface. I don't think this is too big difference over here, right? I know it's simple, but in a bigger tree you will. It depends. Here, interface makes more sense. In real world use cases, I would say more than.
You can make.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, we can have abstract class or interface here, and it depends on your use case. All right? Cool. So, perfect. Let's move on. Not this, but this. All right. No, I don't want to start from beginning. All right. So that leads us to a simple thing, which is dependency injection. What you can do when you are using polymorphism is just move most of your ifs to dependency injection, to your factories. And you write them once, and you don't have to deal with them again. Or it can be generated for you. That's even better. If you don't have to maintain those ifs, then it's fine, right? So we have the fun stuff, right? That's the business logic. That's why we are software developers, right? But then there is the boring stuff, which are factories, builders, and providers, all those things. And we are trying to not deal with them, but we need them to orchestrate the whole thing. And the beauty of that is you just write those little pieces of business logic and wire it together. And if you need different behavior, you can just wire it differently. And the app starts working differently, which is great. You don't want to change the code. You just don't want to wire it differently. And that's very interesting paradigm if you think about it. So yeah, this is example very similar. You just have more planes and the switch statement, which you can just convert in different classes, which will do exactly what I described in the live demo. So I think we can just skip that. So the benefits. I am a little bit more extreme over here and saying forget about ifs, use polymorphism everywhere, which is not true actually. You always need to balance, but polymorphism is not used so much as it could be. So that's why I'm a little bit extreme over here. So as mentioned, conditionals can be moved into factories. You can avoid duplicities. That's what we mentioned in the double switch statement in your toString and execute method. And of course, you separate your responsibilities, which is always good to do. So yeah, this is part of the story. Most people are just abusing conditionals too much. And yeah, that's what I would like you to bring back home and try to think about that a little bit more. The other problem is global state. And let's go through that pretty quickly. Global state is usually the reason why it's hard to test. And can anybody tell me if A and B are the same or are different? Anybody?
Instead of the dot, there should be an arrow, I guess.
Oh yeah. That's true. Sorry about that.
They're not identical objects. They're two distinct objects.
Depends how you compare them.
Really depends, right?
So the second one is true. A is not equal to B.
We are not able to tell because we don't know what it's doing. Because if we introduce some global states there, we can get different results, which is the problem for testing usually. So, quick example, right? We are trying to test some. Oh yeah.
What would be the situation in which they are equal? Are they always different? Like just the code that you gave right there. Are those two different objects anyway?
So yeah, that's right. But let's assume it returns a string or number or whatever, right?
Is equal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't see implementation of do something. It just depends on that.
Yeah, it depends. Really, we don't know. It looks easy to tell, but it's not. So let's write a test where we would like to test the credit card, right? So this is usually what, and this is real world example actually. I just simplified it a little bit. I did this, wrote a test like this, and I got this error. Like what?
Is it PHP or JavaScript?
This is PHP, but
Then charge, instead of dot, there should be a...
yeah, I'm sorry. This is, I tried to simplify it and I haven't run it in like real world, but I'm just trying to demonstrate the behavior. So sorry about that. But yeah, this is error what I got in that situation. And how should I supposed to know, right? So I went to the guy who wrote it and asked, like, hey, what's going on? And he told me, you know, like you need to initialize the credit card processor. So I said, all right, let's do it. And I got another error. So I went back to him and asked, all right, I am seeing this, like what's wrong? And he was like, you know, you need to like start the offline queue, which I did. And another error. And I was like, all right, so what now? And he was like, you know, you need to connect to the database. And then it started working. And this is horrible. How do I supposed to know? This is really like nonsense. So when you exchange your dependencies correctly, like this, and you are explicit, it's way easier to test. So if you avoid the global state, it's way easier to understand what's going on. And just reading the test, it's super simple right now. But the example before, like, that's totally different story. So this is something what really helps you make your code base better. Just avoid global state. And let me actually ask if anybody is using Laravel.
Sorry, but there is DB and the database, they should be the same variables, I would assume.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So Laravel has a very weird thing, which for beginners, they tell you global state is good because it's simple. But when your project grows and it starts to be complex, it's bad because all the global state will just catch you back. And you don't have to use it. It's just syntactic sugar, which will help you. Just keep that in mind. A lot of frameworks and libraries are telling you, hey, global state is fine. It is fine since particular size of your project and testing and stuff like that. So yeah, I have way more examples over here, but let's actually jump right into the automation part. You guys definitely use some CI thing, right? This is very common. But even when companies do, the situation looks like this sometimes. Does it sound familiar? Even in bigger teams, that's very common scenario. So having some automation process that can help you with all that stuff is very valuable, and there are many tools that you can just use, and it will catch a lot of problems which we mentioned already. So yeah, there are plenty of tools, plenty of ways how you can deal with it, and this is something that we thought about and saw a great opportunity to improve that kind of world. And this is something what we are dealing with Kodiak actually. And we're trying to run all those tools for you and help you actually visualize that part and give you feedback that you can just use and fix your code. Other thing what is very helpful is when you connect those things to your Git, and you can fail your pipeline, right, when there is some issue. So having a feedback from your tooling back to your Git and interconnect it is way easier to improve your code base continuously. One extra tip, which is not super connected to it, but it can help you with code quality in general as well. If you are dealing with some UI, just generate some style guides, some documentation to it. It will help you to separate this not logic, but pieces that are meant to be together and which are not meant to be together. And it will be way easier to communicate between each other and deal with changes, stuff like that. Also, hiring a new person is definitely way easier if you have those processes in place. So it's way easier to teach a new guy about your code base when there are some coding standards. There is good naming and all the stuff we already mentioned. So just focus on those important things on code reviews and don't deal with wrong parentheses and stuff like that. So let me summarize. We went through all those things. We saw several issues, right, which are very common. We saw some general stuff. You guys helped me figure out some bad code as well. Thank you for that. We talked about polymorphism. I know it's a little bit extreme topic as I presented it, but I wanted to be a little bit more extreme, so you start thinking about that. And tests, right? The global state is always tricky to tackle with. Yeah?
I have a question.
Cool, sure.
Can you please list some global state libraries for PHP tools?
For detecting a global state, or?
Any tool which uses a global state.
So Laravel is very common to use like global state. They even like, for example, config. They give you config class where you just you just call the values right from it, not from an instance, but from a method, right?
That's a safe factor.
Pardon?
That's a safe factor, right? Doesn't do config get or do anything else.
Yeah, it's.
That the saves are wrong.
No. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just be careful with them because it's a global state. If you don't use it carefully, it can break your tests. If you separate the logic and put it in the right places, which you don't have to test, that's fine. But then some of the shared global state can break your tests, and you are really like wrapping your head around, and you have no idea what is wrong, right? So yeah, tests and automation. Nothing revolutionary, right? You probably saw or heard about most of stuff I mentioned. So just try to iterate on that. It's not like fixing it. Tomorrow I come to work and just fix everything. That doesn't work, right? It's just make small improvements every time, and that makes your code base better. And be aware that you can actually measure even stuff that you don't think can be measured, like bash scripts, right? There are a lot of issues or vulnerabilities, or config files that can be measured as well. It's a syntax. It's a code. So I would like to leave you with a little thing. Just leave the code better than you found it. Every time when you found somebody's code, just make even a little improvement to it. And if you keep doing that for a while, the code base will just get better over time. And that's all I got. Thank you. Any questions? Any more questions? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Since you were talking about Laravel, how would you treat a very fat controller method? Let's say you don't have if and else's, you don't have switch cases. How would you treat it? Because me personally, maybe you can help me out here. Me personally, I try sometimes to just break it down in smaller methods inside a controller. I'm doing wrong, I'm doing good.
No, this is definitely, if you can keep your pieces of business logic as small as possible, name them, and put them in different places, it's always a good choice. Of course, you have some complexity that you are adding, but that's way easier to deal with than having 2,000 lines of just...
So I guess it's best to follow PSR2 standards, keep the things very readable, and that's going to help me, even if the controller, because, for example, I don't know, at some point I bought somebody else's code from Code Canyon because it was much cheaper to just get some stuff done, and I end up with a very big controller with very big methods, and I'm trying to maybe find a better way because I don't like that code.
Definitely. To be honest, like I would, again, this is a little bit extreme, but if you can have your controller, which will just put together a few other methods from some other services or objects, that will be ideal. I know it's tricky sometimes, but that will be
I was
perfect.
talking about my more like legacy code. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's very hard to have this state at the end.
Yeah, but it needs time to get there.
Yeah,
Okay.
you need some time to
Thank
get there.
you.
Anything else?
What would you say the main priorities are if you've got a code base to tackle first versus the ones to tackle last when you're trying to remove tech debt from a system?
This is a very good question. I would say if you are having a really terrible code in one class, but you touch it twice a year, that's probably fine. But if you have okay code in a class which you are changing every single day, I would start there, even if it's better. Because this will save you way more time than the terrible code somewhere hidden, and you don't care too much. You just take a vacation for those 2 days. So. Anything else?
So do you think it works well to schedule time specifically for tackling tech debt rather than just dealing with it as you come to it in course of other work?
So what we, for example, see by our customers is that managers, when they have those charts, they usually, they do sprint planning and stuff like that. And during this sprint planning, they have a quick look and say, all right, we rushed a little bit right now, and we created some extra technical debt, but we hit the deadline, which is great. So let's plan a little bit less new features this sprint and save some time for more refactorings and discuss that next sprint again if we need more or we are okay again. So this is a behavior which we see. Maybe anybody have other experience? I would definitely love to hear that. But yeah, this works from my perspective.
I think I've heard that philosophy before, but I don't think it works.
Okay.
It generally just allows technical debt to build up and up and up, and it says we've got too much technical debt that we need to sort out.
That's definitely true. The point was it's tricky to just dedicate a time for dealing with technical debt, and yeah. That's usually a problem when you don't have exact measurement of that. So when you can measure it, you can start dealing with that. You can come to your manager and say, hey, this is a problem. It's not a problem immediately, but maybe next sprint we will have some problem because you will ask me for a feature that because of this I cannot do or will take me like way longer than expected. So this is something what gives you some data and you can react on that. I would say just start measuring it first and see what you can do. Maybe there is a lot of low-hanging fruits that you can just go and fix, and you will spend a few days and your code base will be way better. Maybe not. It depends.
How to measure that code base becoming way better, but not just better?
So this is something what we are trying to tackle a lot. It's tricky, for sure. There are many tools which we are trying to integrate that can give you all those matrices. You need to do some configuration as well to decide, hey, this is a behavior this is a pattern which we would like to have in our code base because it's beneficial for us. And this is behavior which we are trying to avoid. And just configuring your linting and your code style and all those tools can just help you to do that. It's tricky. We know it's a lot of time. But we are trying to help you at least somehow with the tooling. So yeah, decide what is your coding standard, what you expect, and then measure against it. Just set up some baseline that will just hold your coding standards. Okay. The other thing actually, what we actually see is when you hire a newbie, it's way easier for the newbie just receive feedback from a machine than from a man, right? Because code reviews can sometimes end up pretty badly. But I was never angry on my word to just spell check my stuff. I mean, yes, but it's okay, right?
Some tools are really archaic to use. Some reports, some detailed responses can be really archaic, especially for a new program we've brought them on board. Obviously, especially with error reporting and all that kind of caption. I would say that it's a mix of things. You have to handle the newbie through why this is happening as much as what is feature exception thrown.
Definitely. The question was why, sometimes it's tricky to even understand those outputs, right, from those tools. And yeah, that's definitely true. And we are trying, for example, help there as well to link you to a specific post where it's explained a little bit more. But dealing with those on your code review is way more beneficial than fight if you need to put parentheses here or there. That's just way more beneficial the newbie will learn way more and understand those concepts better. And you need to do it only once. So that's fine.
Okay, I think we've got one more question.
Yep.
Just out of interest, surely it's a bad thing to write code that's maintainable. Like from a business perspective, if I write code which is maintainable but not really that maintainable, then that makes me a more valuable asset to that company. But if I write something that any newbie can just pick up immediately, then I'm technically making myself replaceable.
Very interesting point of view. Okay, yeah. I would say in...
Can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's like a Wikipedia page called How to Write Unmaintainable Code. Go for it.
I would say this is from my experience, when I was working on that startup, we were growing like super fast and with global audience, dating company, right? Like everybody is just swiping right. And the problem is that you own a little bit of that business in the startup, right? It depends if you will have a job tomorrow. If you write really shitty code and it breaks, when TechCrunch release an article about you, right? Do you see the thing? I know, like a lot of corporate world, like there is not the concept usually of equity and stuff like that. But I mean, it's natural, I feel. But yeah, it depends on the environment you are working in. So.
Writing maintainable code isn't that easy, so if you're good at doing that, you're not easy.
To be honest, like if you can write really unmaintainable code, I would love to see it and run our test against it. So that will be great, like proving that it's working or not. So yeah, go ahead, let me know. I will be very happy to deal with that. Thank you very much.